Well, first of all, thanks everybody for being here. For a few years now, myself and Representative Lindsey, as well as Representative Levitas and a number of other people have been talking about this issue of property taxation in Georgia. And a lot of this stemmed out of a discussion a number of years ago on maybe moving away from a property tax system and going towards more of a consumption tax. And I think it was at that time that we really began to see some of the flaws in our property tax. And I know Representative Lindsey and I have talked for years about this idea of being taxed on unrealized gains. And while that was a problem in a growing market, now that we've seen a massive decline in the real estate market, some of these weaknesses of a property tax system have really become glaring. And as I last year began looking at the appeals process and realized how the taxpayer in so many instances was the one who really shouldered the burden of proof and oftentimes didn't get a fair shake in that process, I began to realize that this entire property tax system is somewhat weighted against the taxpayer. And so this off session we began having a study committee, which will meet again later today, to look at some of the problems as it pertains to the assessment process, the appeals process, and how we fix some of this. But in the process of doing that, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution came out with a multi-part series dealing with what is the real-world impact of property taxes in and around Metro Atlanta, and how has that impacted individual property owners, and really pointing out some of the major flaws in our system. When you have neighborhoods in Southwest DeKalb that are being assessed, properties being assessed for $80,000, $85,000, yet the property next door is being sold for $25,000, you have a problem. And people are unfortunately paying taxes that honestly they don't owe. So our efforts are to find all the weaknesses in this system and try to correct it. At some point, we're probably going to need to move away from a property tax system, because it's the only tax system I'm aware of where honestly you pay a tax based on what some other person believes the property you own is worth. And there's not a lot of consistency in that process, and there's not a lot of confidence on behalf of the taxpayers in a process that is based on mere opinion. So we are trying to find all the errors in the system and work them out, trying to shift the burden away from the government, or away from the taxpayer to the government when they want to claim your property is worth something. And it is a long, arduous process that's going to take some time. We passed good legislation last year. We'll hopefully pass good legislation again this year. It's not something that's going to be cured overnight, but it is a very worthy cause. And when you see the stories of these taxpayers who honestly can no longer afford to pay their property taxes in this economy, and you know that their property is improperly assessed, that is a problem that must be dealt with, and that's one of the things we're trying to do. So with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Lindsey for any of his comments.
Let me first start off by congratulating Senator Rogers and the Senate for the study committee that they are having here at this time. It is covering an area that is vitally important in terms of necessary reform. The inequities in the property tax system strike the farmer in Wilcox County, the shop owner in Decoa, and the homeowner anywhere in this state. And we made some good progress this past session with the property tax reassessment freeze that we were able to pass in the House and the Senate in terms of freezing any type of property tax reassessment increases, and also, of course, Senator Rogers' bill that began the process of dealing with the horrible inequities that we presently have in the appeal process. Senator Rogers is building on that this year in his study committee to look at the entire system from soup to nuts, to see what we can do in terms of bringing about basic fairness in the property tax system. What I tell folks is that when it comes time to look at taxation, the first thing that needs to be done is fairness. If the tax owner, property owner rather, or the taxpayer does not believe the process to be fair, we have a fundamental problem. I think what people need to remember is that our entire nation was founded based on a tax revolt because they believed that they were being taxed unfairly by the British. And we owe it to that legacy to make sure that our tax system across the board, not just dealing with property taxes, but every other form of taxation, is fair. And overwhelmingly, the people of Georgia presently realize that our present property tax system is unfair, and we need to make some fundamental changes. And I look forward to working with Senator Rogers and the Senate in terms of getting those fundamental changes that they are looking at in their study committee passed in the House.
Questions?
Well, I know there's been a certainly a lot of talk over the years, and I would assume an agreement that there are a lot of problems with the property tax system. But what do you see as replacing the revenues that of course go away if you do away with property taxes? I guess maybe that's one of the big unanswered questions that we haven't been able to quite grapple with yet.
Well, what we're looking at is making this system, which I think long-term is unsustainable, more fair, at least in the short term. So no one is here today proposing that we have it done away with and replaced by a new tax system. But I would say that as we look at ways to replace revenue generated by a property tax system, I mean, the hallmarks of any good tax system: is it transparent? Is it fair? Is it equitably distributed? And is it easy to understand? And I think when you look at our property tax system right now, it meets none of those. It's certainly not easy to understand. Almost nobody understands it. It is definitely not fair. If you didn't know that already, clearly the recent journalistic work done by David Bennett has proven that just in Metro Atlanta. It is not, again, not easy to understand. It's not transparent. People have a difficult time figuring out what it is they actually owe and why their property is valued at a certain amount. So none of those hallmarks of a good tax system are encapsulated in a current property tax system. But what we can do is, number one, fix the appeals process. When you have property owners who just say, look, I'm not going to appeal because I know there's no way I can win, that's not good. And you shouldn't have a system like that. A property owner ought to believe they have a fair shake when petitioning their government on any issue. And unfortunately, they don't have that now in the property tax system. It ought to be a system dealing with real numbers. And honestly, at some point, we need to look at having professionals evaluate what property is worth. One of the complaints we are hearing from everybody so far during this process is that the Board of Equalization simply does not work. These are good people who are trying to do a good job, but they're clearly not property appraisal experts. They're not properly trained. We don't have the resources to pay them to make it a full-time job. So we need to figure out a better system on how to do that. And then the final thing that we need to do, well, maybe not the final thing, but an additional thing we need to do with this property tax system is use real hard data where it is available. And I'll give you a perfect example. If somebody buys a piece of property at an arm's length transaction, at least for the next period of assessment, or at least the next taxable period, whatever that sales price is, that ought to be the maximum value you could give to that piece of property, because the market is going to determine the true value of a piece of property, as opposed to somebody working for the county or working for the state coming along and saying what they think it may or may not be worth. So wherever we can use real data, wherever we can make the system more easy to understand, wherever we can put the taxpayer in a position where they feel like they're getting a fair shake, I think we've improved a very, very unsustainable system as it stands today.